Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is head on, but not according to Yale University Chief of Psychiatry Fellow. No, she says run and hide. Let's talk about it on Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me is Barrett McNabb. So on MSNBC, psychiatry resident Amanda Calhoun told Joy Reid, there's a push, I think, just a societal norm that if somebody in your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. She went on to say it is okay to cut family members off. So now she did say to tell the family members why.
Okay, let's take a quick look.
And if you then meet somebody and you know they voted for the people who called you trash, or if you're Puerto Rican, you know someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? We got the holidays coming up.
So I love that you asked this question because, there is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why, to say, I have a problem with the way that you voted because it went against my very livelihood and I'm not going to be around you this holiday. I need to take some space for me.
This is just crazy. This is coming from a psychiatrist. I thought the main point of therapy was to help a person focus better on current problems and how to solve them. And it often involves practicing new skills in the real world. And elections happen in the real world. I mean, if you start filtering everything and everyone challenging in your life, you're eventually just going to be alone.
Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to help you develop coping mechanisms or, how to stand up for yourself, something. This is just, no, just shut down, isolate yourself. I mean, it's human nature to, not want to deal with difficult things unless you absolutely have to. You take the easy road. I mean, that's why some people are lazy. They just don't want to do difficult things. I mean, why pay so much money that therapy costs just for a quote, professional to enable your human nature, which you get for free?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, so even before the election, there were numerous high-profile institutions of higher learning, namely, for example, off the top of my Georgetown University, had created safe spaces for the day after the election, and included light snacks, and included Legos, and included Play-Doh. I didn't know that if you graduate from Georgetown University, you had to go through kindergarten again while in school. I mean, this is absurd, and it's that mentality that is not letting these people pull their big boy pants up and go and sit down at Thanksgiving meal. And who's to say you have to talk about politics? What if you talk about, I remember my favorite memory from being a child, and look at that, you kept my teddy bear. Let's have a meal and break bread.
Yeah, a lot of families used to have a rule. What's the 3 things you're not supposed to talk about in polite dinner? It's religion, politics, and what? Money or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, good God, this is just all a result. The safe spaces were created because, there's a demand for it.
Right.
We raise these wimpy kids, like with the helicopter parents and, gluten-free this and peanut-free this and allergies, and the whole self-esteem movement and the participation trophy thing.
Right.
Like, kids are so soft. And so by the time they get to college, they are still 5 years old. And it's like, la, 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 la. I don't want to hear that. And
right.
It's just like, toughen up your kids, people. Like, maybe they should have gone to military academy or something.
I mean, could you imagine being in the workplace? Let's just say Goldman Sachs. And you were a Harris supporter, and you break down on the operations floor of Goldman Sachs in Manhattan, and you just throw this temper tantrum because you can't control your emotions.
Yeah, because if it's
how do you think that's going to go in your job?
Yeah, it's not going to be just one thing that sets people like this off. I mean, how do
Right.
you... What is off limits? Like, no, I won't break down over this. I mean, if it's one thing, it's going to be another and another and another. But, I think a better psychologist, therapist would go, okay, teach you strategies, how to maybe find common ground. Is there a legitimate, ask questions, open up conversations. Like, maybe they have a legitimate reason for voting the orange man. They're not thinking about you and your little subculture group. They're thinking about the economy. They're thinking about other things. They have different priorities.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd love to jump on that because asking, to your point, asking questions like, can you explain why you voted for Donald Trump? And understand why, not that you feel as though it's hateful. Because again, a lot of the people that are upset, at least on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube videos and things like that, it seems to me, again, I don't have a degree in psychology, but it seems to me that it is the supposed loss of a single issue, whether that single issue was trans rights or whether that single issue was abortion. It seems as though the people who were most upset were single issue voters, right? And so I think by asking a question to someone who voted for Donald Trump, why did you do that? Well, I like the fact that he is going to protect our border. I like the fact that he is going to fix the economy and bring prices down. I like the fact that he is going to make the U.S. military stronger and less focused on DEI and more focused on lethality. Those are the reasons why I voted for Donald Trump. So you may be mad because you were pro-choice and you didn't get your way, but that's the problem with hanging on a single issue is it consumes you.
Yeah, and you can't see the forest through the trees.
Right.
But, these things that you just mentioned affect everybody, not just a couple people or maybe a couple points in your life.
Right.
And like I said, if they're going to break down over one thing, they're going to break down over any little thing. And the next thing you know, you're walking on eggshells around those people. And, also people just fail to think, what if it were the other way around? Say if Kamala Harris had won, would those same family members cut you off for voting
Right.
for her? Probably not.
Probably not.
I don't know I don't know of any Trump supporters in 2020 that cut off family members that voted for Biden. I don't know of any.
I mean, it really does seem that the left is best about doing that. I think you have a relatively new friend, and she basically effectively lost her son because he married a liberal woman, and their politics differ so much that the new wife isn't letting the son talk to the mother.
Oh, no, I think he's completely gone already. But yeah, it's just a horrible way. And, I think it's just another way to divide people.
Right. Well, I mean, this is, I mean, you should be able to turn the other cheek, honestly, and be, if you're claiming to be Christian, remember it's Christ-like to have grace. And, if you're a Christian or a Jew, we're able to respect thy father and thy mother. I mean, if you are a liberal and your parents voted in a way that was different than you should respect the longevity of the relationship.
Yeah, they took care of you. They probably paid for your college. Like, come on. Also, like I said, if you cut someone out for one thing and then someone else out for another thing, eventually you're going to be alone. And then when you're old and infirm, who's coming to your bedside?
Right.
I doubt it's going to be the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It's going to be your family.
Right.
And, these are all people on the left. The left is about division and they're anti-family. I mean, come on, you have the Julia Roberts commercials like, oh, vote against your husband. You have
Right.
these leftist states where, if your kid claims to be trans, and I mean, you could lose custody of your kids. That's another way of separating families. And now
if you don't provide gender affirming care,
so-called affirming, and now you have groups wanting religious families not be able to foster kids because they would not, quote unquote, affirm any trans kids. So again, keeping kids away from getting a family that they need.
I mean, that's one of the things that the left wants. They want division. Division is important to a leftist view, and it is important for them to put people into stovepipes so that they can continue their identity politics. If you're not with us, you're against us. If you're Caucasian, then you're a racist, and you need to go through improved DEI training on a daily basis in order to come over here. And you've got people being brainwashed, families put against families. And that's what the liberals and the Democrats want. They want families to be split, whereas Republicans want family and people to come together. And I really want to say that's one of the reasons why the Republicans won so handedly all three branches of government, including both sides of Congress, the lower house and the upper house, is because the Republicans are more welcoming than the Democrats are. You see working class people coming over to the Republican Party in droves. You see this huge uptick in African American. You see huge uptick in Latinos and Latinas coming over to the Republican Party. The Rainbow Party is now really the Rainbow Coalition is now really the Republican Party. You have, all kinds of different. You have Muslims that are coming over and voting for Trump. Jewish people historically have been voting for Democrats or are voting for Trump because it's in their best interest. And so, to really say that the party who welcomes everybody, it's now the Republican Party.
Yep. Yeah, and if you leave the Republican Party, you're not going to have people screaming at you, whereas if you leave the Democrats, you're going to have people screaming at you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this week before Thanksgiving, if you are a liberal who's watching our video, please, please, please reconsider. Go and break bread with your family, be with your family, because life is about family. It's not about who's the president of the United States. And I really urge you to do that. Yep. So thank you so much for watching Azimuth Podcast, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in. Well, isn't it interesting when someone who has disrespected you is suddenly nice to you, just when you happen to have something that they want? Let's talk about it on Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me is Barrett McNabb.
Yeah, so we have this clip to show you discussing the flip-flopping of Senator Schumer. So let's take a look at this real quick.
Senate leaders from both parties think they have the path to the majority in November. Republicans have focused on knocking out Democrats in red states like Tim Sheehy defeating John Tester in Montana and Bernie Moreno defeating Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Democrats are making their first multi-million-dollar ad buys in Texas to support Colin Allred against Ted Cruz, and in Florida to help Debbie Mucarsel-Powell against Senator Rick Scott. This comes as Vice President Harris and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are saying they want to eliminate the filibuster for reproductive rights. We're back with our panel, Dan Henninger, Kyle Peterson, and Kim Strassel. So, Kyle, what do you make of Harris coming out here and saying, yeah, let's get rid of the Senate filibuster rule, that 60-vote rule to pass something, so you only have to do it with 51. She didn't have to say that.
No, but I think it's a mistake on the merits for a couple of reasons. One is it
political mistake?
Yeah, I think it raises the stakes for many of these voters who might like John Tester personally, but then they start thinking about what one party in the Senate could do with 50 votes. And by the way, a Senate without a filibuster that lets Democrats do anything they want with 50 votes is also a Senate that lets Republicans do whatever they want with 50 votes. And so that's, I think, the deeper mistake that she's making. She's imagining Democrats are going to come in and codify Roe Roe v. Wade and so forth. But then Republicans, as soon as they take majority control of the Senate, it's national right to work and national abortion restrictions.
Kim, it's not just Kamala Harris. Chuck Schumer said he wants to break the filibuster not just for abortion, but for voting rights, impose a national voting law on all 50 states. Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator, wants to do it for the Supreme Court. Ron Wyden came out this week and said, well, I like a Supreme Court with 14 justices. So I think a lot of listeners may think, oh, well, this is a lot of talk. It's not going to happen. They'll never break that rule. But what do you think? If they get 51 Senate votes in the White House and the House, will they break the filibuster?
So I'm going to predict she's going to say yes. And here's the reason why, is they already tried to do it. They already tried to do it. And if it was, it was when the Senate was 50-50 and Kamala Harris was as the president of the Senate, she gets to cast 2022, she gets to cast a tie-breaking vote. And so they were ready. They were going to do it. They were on their way to getting rid of the filibuster, and luckily, Joe Manchin from West Virginia and it was Sinema from Arizona said, "Hey, look, we can't support this. This needs to stay." And Chuck Schumer just lamented that they went down to 48 votes. At that point for that matter. And so it is not would they do it if they had 51. They tried to do it when they had 50 plus one. Mm-hmm. So, in the plus one being the vice president as president of the Senate being able to cast that tie-breaking vote. But let's keep going.
In a nanosecond, Paul. and they won't stop at abortion rights, and they won't stop at Supreme Court ethics, and they won't stop at election laws. This would be an open gate for Democrats to pass a law saying that they can confiscate your firearms, get rid of private insurance, and create Medicare for all. Any wish list that they want, there would be no bar against it. And one other thing, Paul, too, that I think people should be aware of, that Ron Wyden bill, not only would it create 14 justices on the court, it would create new hurdles, make it harder for the Supreme Court to overturn Congress. So not only would they put the folks that they want on the court, but then say, this huge new sweeping agenda we're going to put through, we're going to make sure even the court can't push back on it either. And so, this is about power and agenda, and it's not going to stop with one bill.
So much for judicial review and protecting the Bill of Rights.
Threats to democracy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so this was a older clip that happened prior to the election, but that's when Chuck Schumer thought that they had a chance and that Harris was going to take the presidency and that the Democrats were going to take the Senate. And he played his cards too quickly. He didn't wait for the river card before he showed his hand, I think.
And now his tune is extremely different. Now he's saying, well, Republicans need to play nice. We need to be bipartisan. Remember, we need to be bipartisan.
Yeah, that political correspondent, Byron York, said the short version is this: please don't do to us what we were going to do to you. And again, this is just a couple short weeks ago, and really, they were planning on ending the filibuster. And this is just heartbreaking because, every time it's also called the nuclear option in the Senate as well. And there's always been these threats to do this nuclear option. But so what is the filibuster exactly, Kimberly?
Well, it requires 60 votes to pass bills, and it gives the minority party, which coming in January will be the Democratic Party,
right,
give them the ability to demand a higher standard of approval before, the majority party can just pass any old controversial legislation.
Yeah, right. So, interestingly, this is a rule. This is a Senate rule. This is nowhere in the Constitution. This is in the Senate bylaws, and it can be changed. But these are rules that have been agreed to, and the change that has slowly occurred, and there's been these adaptations or mutations, if you want to call it. But when the Democrats controlled the Senate during Obama's confirmation process, the Senate said, "Hey, look, we want to control judges and how judges would be assigned. And so we're going to change the rule, but only for federal judges." And that way they were able to bypass the Republican minority and get a bunch of judges confirmed. So then flip the script when Trump won, and it's time for him to appoint Supreme Court justices. The Republicans didn't have the 60 that they needed just to go over the Democrats, and so the Democrats were not going to. They were going to filibuster the Supreme Court nominees that Trump wanted to put in place. And so Mitch McConnell said, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah, so are you saying the Republican Party did not want to get rid of the filibuster?
Yeah, they didn't want to get rid of the filibuster, but because Chuck Schumer did, in just the very precise way of judge confirmation, Mitch McConnell then said, well, we're going to change the rule again and modify it so that Supreme Court nominees can't be filibustered. But we're going to leave in the regular legislation and keep the filibuster for regular legislation. So just, the precedent was set by Schumer on the lower court federal judges. The precedent got set by the Republicans, basically saying, you did it for these judges, we're going to do it for these judges, and reduced it for Supreme Court. So the only thing that's really left is just regular legislation. And, there's also been some things on the filibuster. If you remember, gosh, it was a black and white movie, and it was like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or something like that. It's an old movie, and it talks about the filibuster, and he's filibustering. And I'll do some research and put the actual title of the movie that I'm talking about. But he goes and he just is talking and it shows close-ups of him just sweating, because really what it is you take the floor and you don't give up the floor as long as you are talking. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's why famously or infamously, Senator Ted Cruz did that massive marathon of a filibuster and read Green Eggs and Ham on the Senate floor and lasted, hours and hours.
23 hours. Yeah. I think he was trying to break a record of 25 hours.
Right. And he almost did it. He got really darn close. But now and actually Senator Joe Manchin was said that he was in favor, if it was going to be a filibuster, that it was going to need to be that you would have to continuously talk. The rules have slightly changed. Now if you just threaten a filibuster, it goes away. So there's no one actually has to stand up and talk indefinitely until the Congress or the Senate recesses. Just the threat of the filibuster, saying, hey, we're filibustering this, that's good enough now. But Manchin said that it should go back to actually having to stand at the podium and
if you really believe in it.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. I mean, they just go, oh, Trump's a threat to democracy. We love democracy so much, but, we're going to get filibuster, get rid of it for this and that. I mean, come on. And then they want to pack the Supreme Court, and they want to put term limits on the Supreme Court justices. And the reason why we don't have term limits on the Supreme Court justices is so that they're not constantly looking for what they're going to do next.
Right.
And I guess that's why we don't have it for Congress either. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the term limits, that would be really hard to do because I'm not a legal scholar. I happen to pay attention more than the average bear, I'd say. I'm very interested. But I would say that would actually require an amendment to the Constitution to put term limits, because the Constitution specifically says that the judicial appointments are for life. And so to change that verbiage would actually have to be a constitutional amendment. Now, the amount of justices on the Supreme Court has changed over time.
Right, with FDR.
Yeah, back and forth. Well, I think he was going to try and pack the court, and it didn't work when he was trying to do that. But the justices have gone up and down throughout our long history of the United States. And so I think it was bad to try and play your hands, because the Democrats really leaned forward in the foxhole and they said, look, this is what we're going to do when we win. And so now, when it is a Republican president, a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a conservative Supreme Court, now Schumer is saying, "Hey, just kidding. We need a lot of bipartisanship." And remember, that we're we were just kidding. And remember, you're for bipartisanship as well. Interestingly enough, Mitch McConnell, shortly after the election, but prior to the Republicans choosing who's going to be the next majority leader, which is Senator Thune, but Mitch McConnell came out and had a press conference and said that the filibuster remains healthy. And so the Republicans are going to be playing by the rules, because honestly, they're the good guys. I know everybody thinks their party is the good guys, but you have one party that's upholding the filibuster to make sure that there's bipartisanship, and there's one party that was going to tear down the filibuster, and they were just going to run right over it. And if one is truly bipartisan, even when they have the power to change it, which one are the good guys there?
Yeah, I mean, the left is known for abusing its power. I mean, come on, Joe Biden just redid Title IX, where men can be in women's locker spaces and whatnot.
Right. Well, I mean, there's obviously this flux that goes back and forth. I mean, when they're talking about judicial review in the Supreme Court, there's nowhere in the Constitution that gives the Supreme Court the authority to do judicial review. But that happened, in the Mulberry versus Madison case, when it came down to judicial appointments that Adams was going to make, but there were some judicial appointments that had not gotten delivered. And so they were going to be invalidated. And the Supreme got brought up to the Supreme Court and said that, hey, look, we're not going to deliver these appointments for the federal judges, because we feel as though the law violated the Constitution that allowed these judicial appointments to happen. And so they kind of stole it. They stole judicial review. They said, look, we can't do this because the law violates the Constitution. And everyone kind of looked around and said, okay. And then that was the precedent that was set, that the Supreme Court got to review the legislation as it pertains to whether it's constitutional or not. But still, this is just one of those things. The Democrats showed who they were when they thought they were going to be able to slide that cookie out of the cookie jar. And then when Trump won, that lid went down, their hand got caught in it. But now they're trying to scream and say, just kidding. We really want you to be it. But I can promise you this: they've already played their hand. If we, the voters, let the Democrats do this again, they've already let us know what it is they're going to do. So don't be surprised if whenever they're in power again, they're going to be power hungry and go ahead and change it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching Azimuth Podcast, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
So we know who won the election between Senator Casey and the Republican challenger McCormick. So why are the votes still being counted? Let's talk about it on Azimuth Podcast. I'm Barrett McNabb, and with me is Kimberly McNabb. So the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania announced that an automatic statewide recount has been triggered, and that's because the difference right now is about 23,000, so it's within the 0.5% that automatically makes that recount triggered. So they have until November 26th at noon to finish and must be submitted by the 27th. Now, officials estimate there are fewer than 80,000 provisional ballots left.
And Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is Democratic, like the election officials themselves, said that ballots must be dated properly.
Right.
And an election official said, well, people violate laws all the time, anytime they want.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and listen to this election official in her own words.
I move that we reject all three categories of these ballots.
Your motion is to reject or dismiss the challenges in this category in front of you?
Correct, yep.
Not going to second that, mostly because I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention to it.
Okay, just want to make sure you understand that she's choosing to violate the law just so she can get the court's attention. Now, I think that is hugely problematic because here we go. You have an election official that is choosing to wantonly violate the law, and also the state Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, they're ruling that the provisional ballots must be signed in two separate locations, and that any provisional ballot that only has one signature should not be counted. And that's what the first gentleman was saying, is we need to abide by the Supreme Court's rules and we can't count these. And what's happening is this election official and effectively this party are continuing to count illegal ballots, meaning ballots that are provisional but are missing the required signatures on there, and going ahead and throwing them in with ballots that are have both signatures. And so it's going to cause a huge issue.
Well, unfortunately, she's not wrong in one part. People do violate the law all the time. I mean, that's just the danger of being the culture that we're in, where, out in California, you can steal $950 worth of stuff until it's counted as a felony, so people just walk off. I mean, defunding the police, and I mean, you're sending the signal to everyone else in every part of life that it's okay to break the law.
Right. I mean, here you have, instances of voter registration. This is in Pennsylvania still. Voter registrations that were come in, that there were thousands of them, and they were filled out in the same handwriting. The names and weren't matching the signatures. The addresses weren't matching where the people resided. And so, Trump brought this forward and said this is an instance of voter fraud. Now, I would say it's voter registration fraud, but it's still voter fraud. How many of those people actually got these provisional ballots and then did their single signature but didn't do their secondary signature on the back of the form? And for her to just go ahead and to say, hey, elections matter and things like that, but you already had instances that are currently being investigated of voter registration fraud. And so you need to take this seriously and make sure that things are done, I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
I mean, we all know of instances where just the most minor technicality got something thrown out, where it was a college application or a test or, home loan application. I mean, it exists everywhere. It should exist here. But, other Democratic institutions are also criticizing these election officials. I mean, you have the New York Times, you have the Washington Post putting out editorials criticizing this. Washington Post said, elections have rules and rules must be followed. Hello. Defying rules is corrosive to democracy and invites the same for others. How would these Democratic elections officials like it if Casey were winning and the Republicans were the ones breaking the rules?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is a truer point couldn't be said, Kimberly. The reason that rules exist is so that there is a level playing field.
And everybody knows what to do.
Everybody knows what to do. And if everybody just did whatever they want, that's what happens in, Marxist and socialist and communist countries, is that, like Venezuela, for instance. There is no way that Maduro won the Venezuelan election. She straight up stole that. But it's because he's in power, and he's able to just count the votes that he wants to count and throw away the votes that he doesn't want to count. And that is exactly what is going on here. What needs to happen, honestly, is clearly these election officials are corrupt. They need to be replaced immediately. And there needs to be, instead of this 3-panel of all Democrats, there needs to be Republicans on that panel, and they need to count these ballots, and they need to have a Republican and a Democrat look at the ballot, similar to the famous photographs. I'll see if I can find one and put it up here. The famous photographs of the hanging chads in the 2000 election, where you have individuals with magnifying glasses looking to see what percentage of the hanging chad was remaining, but they had Republicans and Democrats each looking at every ballot. I think this one's good. I also think this one's good. Too bad it's for George Bush. I think this, if the Democrat was saying it, I think this one's good, and the Democrat, nope, this one's not good. Good for Al Gore. So having that going over each one, but it looks like these guys are just having Democrats do this stuff, and she's obviously not following the rules.
Yeah, and she feels bold enough to say it out loud.
Yeah, she is straight up saying it out loud and on video. I am going to break the law, and because people break laws all the time, so why not?
Why not me?
Yeah, this is absolutely absurd. This is what makes the democracy a mockery of our democracy. And when we heard all during this election cycle that democracy is at stake. Honestly, the Democrats don't realize that the whole time they were talking about themselves. They weren't talking about the Republicans. They were just ratting themselves out. To have the primary rules change and to not have Dean Phillips or RFK Jr. primary Joe Biden. They have Nancy Pelosi saying, "I wish there would have been an open primary." There was an open primary. There was. It's just that the Democrats National Convention changed the rules. And anytime anybody like Dean Phillips won some primary votes, they changed the rules and said, "Well, votes automatically go to Biden."
How is
that democracy?
Election? Yeah, and guess what, lady? Democracies only work when there's voter confidence, and you're just crushing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Especially, it'd be one thing if this was a closed door session and she was able to speak to her Democrat colleagues in confidence. But this is straight up on video where she is admitting that she is going to break the law. Let's listen to it again.
I move that we reject all 3 categories of these ballots.
Your motion is to reject or dismiss the challenges in this category in front of you?
Correct, yep.
Not going to second that, mostly because I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention to it.
If a speech could give a middle finger.
Yeah, absolutely. This should outrage everybody. Honestly, I've seen it a couple of times in some news articles, but I have, as far as me looking on YouTube videos and always trying to come up with video ideas, I don't see this out there a lot. There's a little bit of it, but you should be, forwarding this to everybody and be outraged. The liberals should be outraged about this because, again, if it's true that you're afraid democracy is being undermined, this woman right here is doing just that.
Yeah. And Are there any repercussions for this?
I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, honestly, it depends on how the law is written. I mean, whatever the statute is, it typically has an associated either misdemeanor or felony, and depends on where your state, whether they use numbers or letters. In Texas, they use class A, B, C misdemeanors and class A, B, C felonies, and it depends on what the punishment is for whatever level of crime this is. I don't know if this is election fraud I would imagine it'd be a felony. So at least it's a felony conviction, and there's going to be an associated punishment range potentially for her if she's found convicted. But at a minimum, she could be in contempt of court for the Supreme Court ruling, and she's just not going to follow it. They may say, hey, look, how about you go ahead and hang out for 30 days in jail while you think about it, and then come back out and see if your attitude changes. And that's something that doesn't require a trial. They're just saying you're in violation and contempt of court, and you're going to cool your heels for a little bit and then see what you have to say. So I mean, she could get some immediate jail time just to sit down and shut up and color.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for tuning into Azimuth Podcast, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.